If people are just tuning in, my segment is called Book Review California, and my name is Sue Hirsch, and today we're here with DC Spensley. Thank you so much for being here with us, David. We'll just call you DC, as that seems to be what you like. And you have written a wonderful book that I've read, so I can personally testify to the fact that it's a wonderful book. And it's called Free the Bear, and it has a subtitle, Chronicle of Secession. Is that right? Did I get it right?
That's correct, yes.
Now, can you give us a quick synopsis of the theme and the storyline of the book?
Yeah, thank you, Sue. Nice to meet you. Free the Bear is, it started out in the late 90s, actually. I was on the way back from Tahoe, just kind of daydreaming, and I had just finished reading Ernest Callenbach's Equitopia. And it occurred to me that that book needed an update. What happens after or before that, you know? So I considered it, and the Ernest Callenbach's book is about California secession 20 years after the secession happens. And I thought to myself, well, how do they pull it off? And I started to write and just poured out a bunch of text. That's pretty much my function in the team here, is to pour out just gobs of text. And then I met with my writing partner, Kathy, who's also my life partner, who said, "Hey, you know, I'm interested in this," and she's more of an editorial type of person. So she keeps things kind of tight, works on the language, and you know, strikes all the colloquialisms that I tend to use. She said, "Hey, I'll be in on this as long as it's not a war novel. It's not a book about war." And so I agreed to that, and it was a nice challenge. The book is about California secession. And it is aided by an artificial intelligence that's originally developed as an encryption algorithm, a biological encryption algorithm called the algorithmic life form. And it was a U.S. government project in California. And then somehow the algorithm, the biological part of it, it became sentient. So you have this sentient computer, biological computer system, and they started to call it the cognizant algorithmic life form, which is CAL for short, which is a conceit, I suppose. It's kind of obvious that CAL, and then so they ask CAL, "You're a U.S. government project. They paid for you. Should we give you to the U.S. government?" And Cal thinks about it for about 3 days, brings down the Stanford mainframe, considering this over a weekend, and spits out a 34-page treatise that's referred to in the novel, where Cal lays out this prediction for the future of the United States if, in fact, they were given a artificial intelligence of that kind of scope at that time. So Cal, to make a long story short, Cal says, if you give this AI to the U.S. government right now, they will abuse it, and it will cast the world into a chaos, and there'll be a big war, which will start a new dark age. And that's a pretty dark prediction. So the scientists who were involved in this entered into a discussion with Cal, and that's when the idea of secession was born. The idea is, okay, so how do we mitigate this situation? First of all, they decided to honor Cal's sentience and personhood and hide it withhold it from the U.S. government, which is very important. And then they said they decided that, okay, so what are some scenarios that would reduce this possibility of the United States being a belligerent force in the world and creating just a hellscape, a war-torn hellscape. And one of the ways to do that was to shear off a large portion of the power and energy of this kind of toddler nation. And that is the possibility of secession of California, taking away a lot of that revenue, a lot of that scientific development, and just breaking it off without killing a bunch of people, without starting a war.
The happy weapons you mentioned in your book, actually more than mentioned, in your book, the characters used what they called happy weapons instead of weapons of war, except for one character, and that was sort of almost a fluke.
Right.
Can you tell us a little more about the happy weapons and what kind of war would that what would that be like in a real world situation? How would that actually work? Because I liked how you worked in the happy weapons.
Well, it actually, I think what you're referring to are the happy camps.
Yeah.
The weapons are, so here's the thing. Cal is born. And then for 20 years, once the scientists in Xerox PARC and Stanford and UC Berkeley and Lawrence Livermore labs, all of these things are in the Bay Area, up and down California. We have a lot of scientific research here, a lot of great brains in Palo Alto and just all over the place. Once they decided that California was going to secede, they also said, let's take it slow. And so for 20 years, there was a conspiracy in California to withhold technology from the federal government. And they did ship that encryption algorithm back to Washington, except they shipped an encryption algorithm that had a backdoor. And slowly but surely, California exploited that backdoor and leaped ahead of the federal government in technology. So it wasn't happy weapons. What it was is they developed what people call drones now, or actually there's two forms. There's robots that are autonomous and telefactors that are driven by a remote operator now, which is similar to the drone program that they have in the military right now. So California leapt ahead 20 years. Imagine 30 years ahead of the technology that we have right now. So what they did is they realized that they wanted that the United States was going to try to attack, and once California decided it was going to secede, there would be some repercussions to that. So they knew they were going to have to defend the border, and fight some sort of a battle. So they developed these telefactors, this drone technology of many different varieties, to gently anesthetize in different ways. They have tangle bots, gas bots, these various things. All of these are remotely operated drones. And the interesting part is that the drones are operated by 1 million computer gamers worldwide, participate and fly these telefactors when the U.S. sends troops in from Oklahoma and Texas, and they're marching in California. You see, there's really no central government at that point for the United States to take over or to capture or whatever. They don't really know where they're going, so they're just trying to come through the passes in California. And if you know California, the passes are pinch points. So they guard the passes and all of the areas in California with these kids, basically 14-year-olds gamers, fly these telefactors, and what they do is they send a platoon of soldiers, of Marines, or whatever into California. And because there's a very cleverly disguised EMF field, which is a electromagnetic kind of a field that disables all electronic devices. So they can't roll their cars, their tanks, their planes, or anything into California. So these guys walk in with their weapons, walk through the passes, and they're not happy about that. I mean, if you know anything, I'm a former Marine, and trust me, nobody wants to carry a mortar plate or a heavy machine gun. That usually you put that on a truck or something. And so these guys are walking in there, and then they encounter this technology that they've never seen. It's stealthed out, it's camouflaged, and it's driven by kids with reflexes who have been gaming and winning at these games. And here's the kicker: all of the passes, all of the scenarios in California have been designed ahead of time, 20 years. So a game company has already sold all these games throughout California that have cleverly designed the passes and all of these scenarios. So the kids are familiar with these scenarios already. They already know how to win on these gamescapes. So suddenly it becomes real, and the Army and the Marines coming from the federal government, they don't stand a chance. So the kids knock them out with these drones, and they're loaded onto trucks and taken to happy camps, which are and yeah, there's some bad connotations about herding people up and putting them into camps. That's not what happens here. What happens is they're taken to places where they're disarmed, and they are fed really well. They have lots of media. There's foosball tables, and they're treated really well. And the idea behind treating these American soldiers well is to undermine discipline, to let them know that if California wanted to kill them, that would have happened. You know what I mean? No one's dying. The only soldiers that die in this situation, there's some crazy, I don't know, countrified people who think that they need to defend the border too, and they end up shooting each other in the book. So none of the California, it's called the Independent Federal Republic or Free Republic of California. None of the IFROC people hurt anybody in this. Now there is some. What you were referring to earlier was a situation with Louis Sabatini, who's one of my favorite characters, and we can talk about that a little bit later. So that's the long-winded answer to your question. It's happy camps, and they stay there for 6 weeks, hot tubbing, drinking Chardonnay, hanging out, smoking big doobies, and then they're put back on buses and sent back to the United States. And where they're back in the Army again. And trust me, these guys, they would rather be on vacation in California. Anyway, so that's so what else do you want to know?
I want to know where the inspiration came from for this book. Can you tell us a little about that?
Yeah, I mentioned Ernest Callenbach earlier, who, honestly, I think Ernest Callenbach's book wasn't the most literary piece that I've ever read, that is. But I really loved the ideas, and I think that's the distinction between literature and just good reading. I think literature can be about anything as long as it's written to a certain standard. I like to read good prose, but I'm one for ideas. I like a lot of ideas, and Ernest Callenbach's book was full of great ideas and good characters. Also inspired, I was also inspired by Robert Heinlein, who's one of my favorite authors, who wrote a book called "The Moon is a Harsh Mistress," about the secession of the moon from Earth. And that is there is a artificial intelligence involved in that as well. I also inspired by, now all of these books came before I wrote Free the Bear, or we wrote Free the Bear. Some of the books I read subsequently, in order to do research for a follow-up novel. But I'm also influenced by Kim Stanley Robinson, and he wrote 3 books about California, which are, if you haven't read them, they're amazing. And you should, if you can get Kim Stanley Robinson to get on the Red Star Report, boy, oh boy, I'd be there in the audience for sure.
Can you spell his name for me?
Kim, Kim,
Mhm.
Stanley Robinson, who is he is actually a professor at UC Davis, and an incredible author, very well researched author. And the books regarding secession for him are Red Mars, Blue Mars, and Green Mars, which are books about Martian colonization and about the subsequent separation politically from the Earth. And there's a lot of similarities from between that. And then after that, I just read every possible thing about secession that I could, every possible, and looked into many of the secession movements worldwide: the Scottish secession, the Quebecois, this is Texas, a variety of other locations, just so I was aware of what people were doing, like Vermont. Who knew Vermont wanted to be their own nation?
I want to ask you about the character of Cal. Was Cal a very difficult character to write? I mean, his personality?
Oh my, Cal is the difficult part about Cal is that everybody wants to refer to Cal in the masculine.
Mm-hmm.
And Cal is this is one of my pet peeves. A lot of the AIs are there's actually a robot in the Middle East that is feminized. They all these robots. Now this one is not overly endowed. Let's say that, that tends to happen too. But that I think this idea: why would an artificial intelligence um, decide to adopt a specific gender? Why would it pigeonhole itself? I think that's a human construct, and it's suspect. It's highly suspect. Like, for instance, I think this Middle Eastern AI or this robot has been feminized because women are fighting for their rights as everywhere, and have been for thousands of years, but in the Middle East in particular, and they are gaining. They're gaining, and they're still kind of treated like crap, like an underclass. But I think what they're trying to do there is create another underclass to replace the one that's starting to free itself from a lot of really old-fashioned ideas. So Cal was not hard to write. It was hard to write from that standpoint because of I wrote he every time. Even I fell into it. And but it was easy to write. An AI character is you can do anything. It's an author's dream to be able to write a character that is virtually omnipresent and omniscient. And this is playing out in what I'm working on right now. So Cal is continuing, and this universe, as fiction writers call it, the Free the Bear universe, is continuing.
That sounds great. Now, go ahead and tell us what you wanted to tell us about Sabatini.
Oh, Louis Sabatini is one of a couple of the gamers who are in leadership. There's 2 sets of characters in this novel. The first set of characters are in their mid-30s and 40s. They're scientists, and they form these various shell companies, and like the gaming division is called Vision Division. And Vision Division hired Louis Sabatini and Courtney Cruz to who because they're uber gamers, just amazing gamers, to be in leadership.
And they're teens, right? They're teenagers.
They're teens, yeah. Louis is a little older. He's I think 19, and Courtney I think is 16 or 17, and they know each other. And they have like gamers, they have handles. I think Louis' name in there was in world in game environments was KP, which is Kingpin, and I think Courtney's avatar name in games is Supa.
Yeah.
So they hire these two kids because they're the best out there, and they know all the other kids. If and they have different strengths. Louis Sabatini is he's kind of a berserker. He's just really gifted, really talented gamer, and full of bombast, just like a total
In the book,
teen.
one of the adult characters called him, said about him, well, out in society, he's going to be a loose cannon right now after he shot the federal soldier.
Yeah, that was that the and I'm dealing with that right now in the follow up. That Sabatini is traumatized by that. He's kind of a he doesn't really mean to be an asshole, but he kind of is because his testosterone. I mean, he's 17 or 19 or whatever, so he's really capable of just about anything. Without giving away too much in the book, he's part of a group of gamers that's defending the borders in California, and the U.S. government doesn't even come close to finding out any of this stuff, but accidentally, just by a fluke, some Navy SEAL, Lieutenant Commander Carlos Beltran, stumbles upon their command bunker somehow, and breaks in and basically discovers a bunch of kids, pulls his Desert Eagle out, which is a big scary gun, and tries to take them down. Now it's actually forbidden for any of the IFROC kids to have firearms. They live in a world that's all about games. You know what I mean? This is a game to them, and they're not really hurting anybody. They're prosecuting a battle, but they're not killing or hurting anybody. So Beltran comes in, and he's a warrior. This guy's a serious player. So he comes in and he tries to take them down. Louis, being kind of a little bit of a street kid, had a pistol stashed because Louis he's not very trusting, and he also knew that they were at war. He knew that this was kind of serious. So Louis pulls his pistol out and shoots Beltran because he doesn't, I guess he's not paying attention to Louis at that time. I don't know how you get the drop on a Navy SEAL, but he did.
The book seemed to indicate that Louis was behind the door when the SEAL broke in. And so he shot the SEAL in the back and in the back of the head.
So yeah, that is and the reason that that scene exists is to add a note of reality to it. And so so it freaks Louis out. He's a kid, and he immediately runs at that point. I think he runs from there, and Beltran, sadly for the feds, he never got to report back. And a good thing for the kids is that really didn't set back the movement at all. But sadly, and also I think the loss of this life and the gruesomeness, because I don't really spare you the contrast between all of this fun stuff happening in the bunker and the gaming to this gruesome death really illustrates.
Yeah. I liked it for that element of seriousness that it added, and a little bit of a break in the levity, because it brought Sabatini back to his girlfriend. Was that Cruz? Was that her name? No,
Courtney Cruz.
Courtney.
Yeah. Right.
Courtney Cruz, and I like that it ended up bringing them closer, and that she saw him as someone who hadn't wanted to do this. She finally saw who he really was, that he was traumatized by this too, and that he wasn't just, a jerk, and that's all there was to him. It made him more real, more of a
Well,
whole person.
it's ironic too that that even though what he did was wrong and against the rules, he still saved the day.
He did.
And I think that's another thing too. This is that with it was a sacrifice on his part, even though he didn't realize it at the time. And I follow up on this too. I think there are two characters in this who the historian and both and Louis Sabatini are both really burned out after this all happens, and they move up north, and I continue the story with them. That little section I sent you about Kim Kardashian,
Mhm.
that's about Louis. Now, see, now Louis, the historian whose name evades me right now for some reason. There's a camera on me, so I'm losing my mind here. So, even the Zoom camera has got me all freaked out.
I know. I've been there. When we were first getting my segment started, my first few shows, one or two of them were really, really great. And then there'd be like one or two when for some reason I was just feeling really, really nervous. But anyway, I also wanted to ask you, who is your favorite character in the book?
My favorite character is one of the older characters, actually the oldest character in the book, in terms of age, and his name is Virgil Sung. And Virgil Sung is like I don't know, third or fourth generation Chinese American who is a chaos theorist. And Virgil is the kind of did you ever watch, and this happens in lots of different stories, there's in any kung fu story there's always the master who teaches the youngsters how to do everything right, and teaches them sometimes tough, and Virgil gets everyone together in this book, all of the older scientists, and he's the catalyst of this. But nobody really knows what Virgil's up to. You know what I mean? He's a mysterious character. He's a martial artist.
And then you made him even more real, and you made him a rounder personality by making him by showing us that he had actually become very power hungry in the end. And
wouldn't you? I mean,
having and he came to try to get Cal for himself, and he wanted to use Cal to go over to Mexico and become a leader in Mexico somehow.
It's California. I've heard it said, and this is a very quantitative viewpoint, of course. People say California is the fifth largest economy in the world, which makes us somehow badasses. Honestly, I think it's more of the progressive nature of California and the polity here that makes California a badass. Not only that, and the absolute variation of physical geographic beauty here, that and the resources that make us great. But imagine being somebody who has their hands on the levers of power that nobody knows about, and what that can do to even somebody as dedicated to a detachment, a Zen kind of detachment as Virgil was. And I would say that that there's more to Virgil and Virgil's relationship with Cal than we know from the first novel. That's all I'm going to say about that.
Are you now in the process of getting this book published, Free the Bear, Chronicle of Secession?
This first iteration is self-published. We decided, I think I sent it out to 25 or 30 different, and I think everybody who has the idea, oh, I have a book, I want to publish it, looks for an agent first. Everybody says, get your query letters together and find an agent. So I looked for an agent. I looked and looked and looked, and I got some nice letters back. And they just weren't interested. So I got sick of doing that and decided to self-publish on Amazon. It took a while to make it happen. I had to kind of skill up to it. But we did it in 2017 and sold several thousand books. It was for a freshman effort, self-publishing effort. It was very well received. Now, not without some effort on our part. We did several dozen book readings up and down California: Joshua Tree, Bolinas, Palo Alto, Pacifica, several in San Francisco and Marin and Sonoma, etc., all over the place. We read in bookshops and bars and stuff like that. And I did a lot of self-marketing of the book. We did okay with it. I actually had to pay taxes on that revenue, and was happy to do that. I'm always glad when an artistic project actually has quantitative results. But at this point, I think we're in discussions with a publisher in Oregon right now called Stern Castle Publishing, and we're talking to a guy named Don Gomez, whose outfit this is. Don and I are both ex-Marines, and so we speak the same language on a couple of different levels. So right now, I think Stern Castle is considering the novel. I hope they're interested in doing so, and I think what we would do at that point is just run it through the editing. Again, there's some things, obviously, any artistic project can always be better. So I would go through and make all the changes that I really wanted to make. We would reskin it and re-release it as an actual published piece and have the weight of Stern Castle behind it. I honestly believe, and then sure, every author thinks their book could make a great a miniseries.
So, DC, you said also that you are an artist as well. Can you tell us a little bit about your artistry? Is that one of yours right behind your head?
Yes, this is. It is. Now, it's rare for me to actually to use actual paint nowadays. I had a 20-year career as a physical media artist, painting, sculpture, collage, etc., in San Francisco, where I did fairly well. I mean, not world class, you know what I mean? I pretty much was in San Francisco, the Bay Area, and California. And then during that period of time, new media became a thing. It started to, in particular, virtual worlds, and a variety of other technologies. And I just happened to be one of the few artists I knew involved in that. So I've been growing up, and sadly, I don't do a lot of physical media anymore. The piece behind me, right, is it's called Greebles and Nernies, and anybody who knows anything about industrial light and magic and the creation of spaceships, etc., the little geometric object sticking out the side of a spaceship is called a greeble and nerny. Greebles or nernies, interchangeable. But this is a painting of greebles and nernies that I had up. I did under a pseudonym because I ran a gallery in San Francisco called Fiction Science Gallery for a period of time, and I didn't want to show my own work in there, so I this was under a pseudonym I used called Dan Coyote. anyway, so and Dan Coyote's relevant to the new media thing, and I started to work in virtual worlds in 2006, and got immediately famous, flash in the pan famous, let's say. My work was in the New York Times, and suddenly galleries and museums in Europe were inviting me to show my work. And I never would have got out of the Bay Area or out of San Francisco with this work, with the physical work behind you. But my work in virtual worlds has continued to be fairly popular. I'm right now I'm in pre-production on an hour-long. This will be the 7th hour-long theater piece I'm doing. And I do this one will debut in a variety of different places. I'm going to do what are called petite salons, and my wife and I fly into Paris. We rent a car. I'll be doing a petite salon in Paris, one in Antwerp, Belgium, one in the Netherlands in Valkenburg, and maybe one in Berlin if I can hustle it up. And these are like, living room parties where we get some cheese, we drink wine. I have a video projector, and I show a projection of a live performance by people who are logged in. And this is one of the reasons I wrote Free the Bear, is because I live and breathe. I understand the state of virtual being. You know what I mean? I understand. I've met a lot of people that I've never met physically that are dear friends, and the ones that I have met are the ones that some of the people I'm visiting in Europe are people that I've met in virtual worlds and in game environments. So this piece is it's an original score, original stage set, and just the story is very similar to the genre that Free the Bear is in. There's a genre of science fiction right now called what they call solar punk. It's also called interchangeably called hope punk or social sci-fi. Now, hard sci-fi is really all about the tech. Social sci-fi is about the social aspect of it, about the relationships between people and the polity. And I think in this new story, which is the working title is named after a poem by Richard Brautigan from 1974 called Watched Over by Machines of Loving Grace. So the title of the show will be, and what solar punk and hope punk are and social sci-fi are about an apocalyptic theme, which is big in sci-fi and in various genres. But the difference is what happens after. Do we learn anything? Does the world improve? Like Margaret Atwood, another author that I just adore, her Mac Adams series, and the world ends in that. And what happens after that is a mixed blessing. Margaret Atwood is a crazy futurist, realist, with a very dark sense of what the world is about. If you've seen The Handmaid's Tale or read the book, it seems to be unfolding right now in our society. But hope punk is and my stories tend to be about there's enough dystopia that's been done over and over and over. And I think from a theoretical standpoint, a conceptual standpoint is that the more you keep on flogging that dead horse, the more it becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy. If everything is negative in your stories, and look from Cervantes forward, most of the fiction, and this is why I take umbrage with literature, because literature can be about horrible things as long as it's written well. And that's because they have this kind of conceit of objectivity. And for me, you can't be objective in life. It's impossible. And if you feed people's minds and their hearts poison, they will get sick. And I think our culture has been feeding people the wrong kind of dystopia, or let's say the kind of dystopia that they're addicted to, that they find savory and interesting. However, that doesn't mean it's good. It's
Right.
nutritious.
Mm.
So the Free the Bear and the story that the theater piece I'm working on, it are dystopias that work out, that have utopian yearnings. I mean, I know what species I'm in. I'm in a
Mm.
very unruly and vicious species, but not all of us are like that. We can humans can be as um, kind and generous, egalitarian as we can be vicious and selfish.
We
And
can, we can.
I want to try, and that's what my art is about. All of it is
Mm.
about, all the music, all the theater, all the writing is about in some way contributing to the weight of that potentiality. Is that if I think what you write in some ways has a potential to come true. I wrote Free the Bear because I want, not so much I want California as a free political entity, but that I want California values and the respect, equality, the equity, and the emphasis on fairness and quality of life to be, I want to increase that for people.
So I was going to agree with you. Actually, you were saying that there's a lot of dystopia that we're reading, and there's a lot that we're currently living. And I think that, I feel that a lot of that dystopia has come down really from the top, like trickle down economics. And we need to write a better script, as you have done. We need to write happy camps. We need to create happy camps in our daily lives for everybody. For
I love
everybody.
camping. What's not to like? The best camping in the world is right here in California.
I used to love camping. I'm kind of a miserable camper now because I'm sort of a princess, and I've got to have all my little creature comforts. But aside from that, I think we need to write like a California happy. We need to create a California happy camp where we actually undermine the federal government in all sorts of ways by treating everybody really well, just like you had it written in your book.
Well, the next book, there's a follow-up book on the way. And the first one's Free the Bear. The second one, the working title is Free Agent. And it continues the story of California, which is by no means a cakewalk. Um, Here's the scenario. California secedes bloodlessly. And for whatever reasons, and I won't give away all those reasons, the federal government leaves California alone because there's really nothing they can do. But in that, and then the rest of the states haven't changed a bit, and the South secedes again as well. So they see California and they say, oh, we're going to do that. So they secede again, and they do so not bloodlessly. So the hellscape does happen in North America. California is just not involved. California is actually brings the blue hats in, the UN peacekeepers into CONUS between the South and the North. And it is bad. It is bad. If you think what's happening in Russia and Ukraine is bad right now, imagine the North and the South without California and Washington and Oregon perhaps involved. Imagine them fighting it out. And imagine that happening. And what you're talking about is so anyway, the next novel is predicated on, it's not so much about that, but it's more about Cal, about where Cal goes and imagining Cal's life. California's in there, and all of this stuff about the progression of this history, this alternative history, is in the next book. I've got about 80,000 words in this book. It's quite progressed at this point. I'm going to go for about twice as much, and then cut out, just pare down. Hopefully Sterncastle will be interested in Free the Bear. And I hope that, and if they're interested in free, I hope that that's an incentive for Sterncastle to take up Free the Bear, because Free Agent is coming right down the pike. Afterwards, I'm going to have enough material for a third book, I think, which is a little ambitious at this point, but I've got an outline for it at this point. But I'm right in the middle, deeply embedded in Free Agent right now, which takes it a little bit further. Cal, like Louis Sabatini, is tired and a little gun shy, because Cal starts out very idealistic, like Louis does, and the reality of the world weighs on individuals, and Cal is not immune from that.
I liked the part in the beginning where Clement was playing chess with Cal, and Cal was still very young and so idealistic that he realized he didn't like it when Clement took back the last moves. So it looked like it took Cal, like Cal lost quicker, and Cal was actually presenting him a good challenge, but they couldn't let anybody see that, and that's part of the reason, but only part, that Clement was changing the last few moves of every game in the logs.
Yeah, well, Clement was cheating.
Yeah.
You see, and that's an important lesson for kids too. When they run into somebody who's a little older, a little more savvy, a little more cynical, and that person cheats them, what does that do? That makes them that heaps that cynicism and that distrust on somebody who already has a well-developed sense of justice. Kids know what's right.
Yeah.
That's one of the reasons that the younger kids are involved in this, and that why they're a joy to write, because they're not yet cynical. They're not yet convinced that this is how it has to be. Truth is, I remember that boy inside me. I want to be that guy. And I think we all are. I think we all are afraid to be be disappointed again by the cynicism. And I'm not trying to say that the world is rosy. Okay. I'm not in denial of that. I'm 60 years old. I've seen it. I've been around the block a few times. I just decide to try to add something else. I'm not saying I'm evolved or anything, or I'm better than anybody else. This is just what I'm choosing to do my art on.
Right.
I hope people like it, and I want to give them nutrition and stuff that makes them happy and head scratchy. Like, oh, why didn't I think about that? Or, wow, there may be something else, some other possibility out there, instead of is something that you might have assumed. That's what my art is about too. It's about encouraging people to look past their assumptions. That's what an artist's job is to point out different ways of seeing.
Which sort of brings at least my mind back to what we were talking about before the show started, about how I never really outgrew that secret desire to be a superhero from Marvel or DC Comics, and I'm still there, and that's art too in its way. It's an art that brings back hope and an idealism of justice.
Oh my!
And
have you seen Love and Thunder?
No, I haven't yet.
Oh, dude, wait till it is Taika Waititi is a Pacific Islander director out there. And he was given, now this is the Thor franchise, okay, which is all about this bombastic, blonde Nordic Norse god, right? And and it's so serious. But Taika Waititi, being the director that he is, turns it on its head. And if you like the whole that superhero idea, those ideals, Psycho Watiti keeps that ideal and adds to the narrative in such a humorous way, and takes it from a testosterone filled self-righteous heroic story and broadens it out in such a hilarious way. See, I'm a big fan of Taika Waititi. He also consulted on a show recently called Reservation Dogs, about teens on the reservation. Just someone who's doing amazing work, who's very, in my mind, modern and also an ally in terms of trying to do hope punk or social fiction, social stories that encourage people to that it's not all, that there are options in life. How you respond is what you're in charge of. What comes into your head, like my mom told me a long time ago, it doesn't matter. You're not in charge of what comes into your ears. You're in charge of what comes out of your mouth.
Yeah, yeah.
And I live by what Georgia told me a long time ago, is that it's I try to, anyway, let's say that. It's
All right, so in wrapping this up, I am going to ask you now, DC, to repeat the title of your book and where we can find it, please. Wish you a happy day and great book sales.
Cool. Well, hey, the name of the book is Free the Bear, A Chronicle of Secession. It's available at Amazon, or you can go to freethebearbook.com, and you'll have links to it from that, and also a little bit of synopsis, links to the California flag that I've updated. I've removed those disturbing stumps, put the red star behind the bear, which symbolizes for me the bear turning its back on the corrupt establishment of the East Coast invaders that are still to this day occupy California.
So that's where we can get your books. And I hope that you have wonderful, wonderful book sales for the life of the book and the next one as well.
I hope so too. Thank you so much, Sue. And to the Red Star Report, I'll be out there in the audience watching you guys operate. Thanks for your good work.
This has been Red Star Report, California Book Review, and thank you, listeners, for being with us today and hearing me chat with DC Spensley on Red Star Report and allowing me to do this segment today.